here in Module 10. It says discuss MFA's objectives for the Monet exhibit, like Joy just said. Should we just go in a row, start with Chelsea and move down?
Sure. So I thought that pretty much the MFA's objectives for the Monet exhibit were to preserve the integrity of their art and to get more people to buy memberships, and they had some specific demographics that they were targeting with those objectives.
Mary?
I don't want to say everything, like if we just, so
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
can.
When I looked at in the case study, they specifically called out they want to increase and diversify their membership, build membership loyalty. They want to try to catch up from the deficits because they had large deficits between 1990 and 1994.
Mm-hmm.
Their original Monet exhibit, although it did really well, it did not translate into memberships.
Yes.
So they didn't obtain any extra punch from that. And then they also wanted to reestablish themselves as international leaders of the visual arts community.
Right.
I felt that, yeah, they also wanted to make this particular Monet exhibit the most comprehensive ever assembled of Monet's pieces post-60s, past the 60s. They wanted to break even at 325,000 visitors, and they wanted to target outside of Boston area.
Yeah, and to add on top of that, too, it seems like it was an opportunity for themselves to rebrand the organization because the organization had gone through just like a facelift as far as the facilities go. So it was like a chance to let everyone know, hey, we're new, we're an old organization, but we've got new facilities, and it was an introduction to that as well.
There was also, in some of the research that I looked at, there was an exhibit at the Brooklyn Museum a few months earlier that was Monet in the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
And that had, I think, corporate sponsorship attached to it, and it did really well. So that became sort of a model for why they reached out to Fleet.
Yeah, that leads us into the next question. Is like, what was attractive to Fleet for this, and what for both of them? Why was Fleet attracted to this exhibit, and why was the MFA attracted to Fleet?
Why don't you start, Paul?
Okay. I would say that this was attractive to Fleet because Fleet was also going through a rebranding of sorts as well. They've been growing and growing and growing for close to 20 years, starting in the late 80s, going up into the late 90s. During the planning phase of this, they swallowed up. I'm sorry, I don't want to make the image of a giant behemoth bank, but that's what they were becoming within New England, where they followed up another big bank within the area. So they were going through an image crisis of closing branches and of having to do a bunch of layoffs, and then moving their home office from Providence, Rhode Island to Boston. It was a reimagining of this old organization that from humble beginnings to make themselves into not a monster, but somebody who's a part of the community and a part of Boston.
Because of the merger, right? They merged two different companies together, and so they wanted to rebrand in Boston and show that they still had ties to the community, and they were still, even though they were becoming this really big organization, they still had they did have humble beginnings, and they were still connected to the community and the cultural aspect of Boston.
And the New England area. The region was certainly, they're still more regional based and headquartered.
Yeah. But why would Fleet be attractive to MFA, Mary?
Well, lots of reasons. I mean, the obvious is they had very deep pockets. They had a lot of money to bring to the table. But I think that the museum was very smart in how they allowed themselves to become engaged. There's all this research about, charities don't act like you're the victim and the sponsor's going to come in and save you and so on and so forth. I think there was some concern that the art was being trivialized in terms of the marketing campaign, but from my perspective, I thought it was a brilliant corporate sponsorship that was really win-win. They worked very closely together, meeting twice a week for 18 months or whatever, to make sure that their messages that they were sending were were integrated and complemented each other.
Yeah.
I think that the Fleet had a lot of high wealth individuals. Granted, they wanted to attract high wealth individuals to Fleet through through museum connections and things like that. But also, I think they brought a lot of potential donors to the table and members via the Fleet community. One of the things in terms of membership that probably helped is that this website that they launched that took you on a tour that Fleet put the money up for reached people way outside the community so they could enjoy the exhibit, and it would be
for seniors,
to see how that drove membership. I think that the fact that they could reach out to all the schools, that the museum provided a vehicle for Fleet to really make people feel like they were definitely part of the community on an intimate level. But I think it also, the exhibit was so big and the Fleet merger was so big, I think it sent a message that big can be a good thing, not a bad thing, because the money it was the most successful exhibit I think that they had in a very long time. And so I'm going to stop there for now.
I think that you hit the nail on the head, because Fleet contributed money and they also contributed members with their, not just their employees, their employee base and their customer base, but together with all of that, they provided the people as well as the money, and the membership was the major goal of the MFA. So they were complementary goals.
They did double their membership through this exhibit and through having it, and did reach out to 20,000 low-income students that wouldn't have otherwise gotten a chance to see it. The engagement of employees at every level, from the very top all the way down to bank tellers volunteering to be chaperones. Yeah.
That was pretty cool. So the
risk. Yeah, what were the risks?
I think mainly that one I was struggled for actually. Well, what was the risk for Fleet other than money, other than the loss of money? I didn't come up for an answer with that. What was their loss? What do you think their risk for MFA? They had a great deal of risk, I think, with the corporate, for the integrity of the art and things like that. But for Fleet, what were the other than the potential loss of money and it not being successful, what do you think the risks were?
Well, I think that they would have not gotten this image rebranding that they were looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, people might not have wanted to respond, no matter, even if they were doing this wonderful thing for the community, it could have, the risk of people responding to it could have been a turnoff. But I think the fact that they took it outside of the charitable contribution arm of Fleet and added it as a marketing campaign, a social consciously marketing campaign, mitigated that risk tremendously, because they really could control images that way in terms of their marketing and their advertising, which personally I think was genius. To be sitting in traffic and be able to look at a bus with a beautiful Monet painting on it, that's not too shabby. That was genius, I thought.
And plus, above that though, above the money, the base amount of money that Fleet provided, they each provided another $500,000 apiece on top of that, which, I mean, that is a great monetary risk, especially for an organization that before this new leader, they were operating at a deficit with memberships that were not growing. They were stagnant or even lowering for a certain number of years. Like, that's a huge risk. Like, they kind of put a lot, they went all in on this, hoping that it would get the reaction that they were looking for in the community.
And there was also the risk that there could have been incompatibility with the two goals, because the two organizations did have different goals for the partnership. So there's the potential within that it could be incompatible, and that, like, maybe the MFA meets their goals, but that Fleet doesn't. And so I think there is risk for Fleet as well.
There was the piece about the art on the bus, how it was one panel to another, and then the museum was really afraid that people wouldn't be able to delineate the pictures from each other, and so they took them 2 months to agree on white lines
Yeah.
And then
They
they finally
compromised with that.
right, and that was the compromise. But the fact that that took 2 months, I think, is an insight. It certainly wasn't a perfect world, but they worked very, very hard to make it work. And I think you have to put it in context of 1998. $1998, $2 million in 1998 in today's dollars really gives you some kind of framework for how much risk there really was. It was a lot of money.
And really, you know, too, like that white lines thing you're talking about taking 2 months. From the for-profit business, it was one person's decision versus the nonprofit, and how many levels that have to go through in order for approval like that to happen. When we're talking about, like, for a for-profit business, they're not thinking about artistic integrity. They're not thinking about those kinds of things. But for a nonprofit, those are the kinds of things that have to be thought about. It's not about the price tag, but it's about, you know, we're serving up this art in the way that we want to serve it up. And
that's one of the risks to the MFA, right? That's one of the risks that the MFA took on, was the fact that by partnering with a corporate organization, the integrity of the art could be compromised.
Right.
And that's one of the risks that the fleet didn't have to worry about, but the MFA did. And so, talking about the other risks for the MFA, I also, one that I didn't think of until I read that other article that was posted, but the idea that they could end up losing money from other sources because it was so successful. So, like, if all they, you know, people see that they put $2.5 million in marketing and they're partnering with this really rich corporation and they put all that money into it, well, then maybe their traditional donors say, well, the MFA Boston doesn't need us.
Yeah. Right. And then they're losing diversity and that kind of thing, because all of a sudden you're going after this high level. When the lower levels go away, the high level goes away. I mean, then you sort of collapse into yourself as far as donors go. Yeah.
And then the other big one that stuck out to me from reading that article was also I think it's also a risk for both the fleet and the MFA, is what if it's too successful? And you don't think of that as being an issue, but if it is so successful that, let's say, the MFA Boston gets so many new members that they literally cannot support them all, or if fleet gets so many more customers that they don't have enough branches, the bank literally isn't big enough. Right. That could potentially happen.
I think we should consider that a quality problem. I think the other thing that was interesting is that the local economy was boosted by $31.6 million because of this exhibit. So the fact that it puts the museum at the center of being the economic driver is huge for communities. So from my perspective, I don't think they were as worried about losing other donors as opposed to giving people more reasons for why they wanted to continue to support the museum in the future. Because this wasn't like a long-term donation. This was just for this exhibit. So how do we do this again? Who do we draw the next time? You know, stuff like that.
Well, I think that takes us nicely into the next one, which is how do we assess the results of the exhibition and what criteria do we use? I think this definitely was a success. And what you were just saying, Chelsea, they didn't lose their other donors and things that, you know, fortunately, they seemed that others almost wanted to match them, they did well with other aspects of their you know, they had other sort of offshoots of the Monet, the Impressionist and other exhibits, and their speakers and their other education elements that they kind of they're not offshoots, but you know what I'm saying. They had other elements that went beyond, that were parts of this exhibit that helped out and were very successful and brought in 173,000 other something like that.
And really, you can't look at new members as a measuring stick.
Right.
You have to look at renewals as whether or not.
And that was good.
It kind of had that. They had to like wait another year to see how successful it was based on renewals, not on just new memberships.
Right.
Because you can get double memberships in 1 year, and then the next year nobody signs back up again. But yeah, they retained a lot of those new members.
Yeah. It looked,
I'm really
did
interested
really
in
well.
what Fleet uses to see if it's effective or not, and to find out if Fleet met their goals and if it was successful to them and if they do it again. Because we don't really have a lot of data about how many new bank customers there were or what the perception of Fleet within the area, what that looked like, and we don't really have enough data to judge if Fleet thought it was successful. But I wonder what they thought.
Right.
Right.
I'm sorry to do this. We got to jump to the last question so I can
Okay.
make this production meeting.
NBO's
Which is-
viewpoint criteria, in addition to financial support, would you consider most important selecting a company's partner for sponsorship? I would say ethical practices and their mission.
Reputation, reputation, reputation. Do their values match your values?
Right. Which I'm here from Houston. I used to work at the Alley Theater before they had the renovation when they opened, and you would look at they had a big board when you walked in the lobby that had all of their major donors. I would say 85% of them had been indicted since the year 2000 for tax practices. I mean, we're talking about Enron, Anderson and Associates, which was the accounting firm for Enron, and then a lot of other energy companies who got caught. And Stanford Financial, let's not forget. They were, all of their files were seized by the FBI just one day at 8 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, looking at books of corporate sponsors, I think, is a very good idea.
Well, and you have to affiliate with somebody, like I said, that's had a good track record. I mean, if Enron had their track record and then you said, oh, we don't care, let's have them be our sponsor anyway, even if they're, not that they last. You know what I'm saying?
You got to research.
Have to an organization that.
And I also think that they need to have complementary goals. Part of why the MFA Fleet partnership worked so well was because they both wanted to, the company wanted to rebrand their image. If the corporation just wants to put their name on something, or they just want to make as much money as possible, then they might not make it. Might not be a good fit.
I'll be right there.
With a nonprofit organization, because it's not like baseball stadiums where you name it after the company and then they don't have anything else to do with it. It seems like these kind of partnerships that we're talking about are more mutually beneficial, so they have to have complementary goals.
Right.
Thanks, Paul. Sorry I'm technically challenged.
That's all right. Thank
Paul.
you.
Thanks so
See
much.
you next time.
I hope this
Bye,
works.
guys.
Bye-bye. Have a good day at work,
Break a
Chelsea.
leg, Chelsea.
Send us the link.